Few creatures remind us of that more brutally than the grizzly. When these massive predators strike, it's not just about their raw power. It's about survival, territory, and sometimes human error. Grizzly attacks aren't just bear stories, but lessons in nature's unpredictability. From hikers stumbling into danger to hunters becoming hunted, these encounters blur the line between predator and prey, forcing us to question our place in the wilderness. Understanding them isn't just curiosity, it's survival. In the autumn of 2006, deep in the heart of Russia's Sikhote-Alin Mountains, Vladimir Kozlov prepared for what he expected to be another ordinary hunting expedition. The region, known for its rugged terrain and dense forests, was home to one of the most dangerous predators in the world, the Russian grizzly bear. Vladimir, a seasoned hunter and outdoorsman, had spent years navigating these treacherous landscapes, but nothing could have prepared him for what lay ahead. Vladimir had set out early in the morning, his rifle slung over his shoulder as he moved through the thick underbrush. His objective was simple: capture footage of the elusive Russian grizzly in its natural habitat. Equipped with a high-powered rifle and a camera strapped to his backpack, he planned to document the bear's movements while ensuring his safety. He had always been careful in his approach, understanding that even the most experienced hunters were not immune to the unpredictable nature of the wilderness. By midday, he had followed fresh tracks leading toward a small clearing by a fast-moving stream. Kneeling beside the water, he studied the tracks carefully, noting their size and depth. This bear was massive. He felt the weight of his rifle and took a steadying breath. The air was crisp, the silence almost eerie, save for the distant calls of birds overhead. Then, without warning, the quiet was shattered. A guttural roar echoed through the trees, followed by the unmistakable sound of branches snapping under immense weight. Before Vladimir could react, a massive Russian grizzly burst from the foliage, its golden-brown fur bristling in the sunlight. Its black eyes locked onto him, filled with a terrifying mixture of rage and predatory instinct. He had heard stories of these bears charging without provocation, and now he was living that nightmare. There was no time to think, no time to hesitate. His survival depended on his reaction in the next few seconds. As the bear charged forward, Vladimir instinctively raised his rifle, his fingers tightening around the trigger. The bear's sheer size made it seem like a moving mountain, each step shaking the ground beneath him. His heart pounded in his chest, but his hands remained steady. He fired. The rifle's deafening crack echoed through the valley, and the impact was immediate. The bullet struck the bear square in the chest, its force stopping the beast mid-charge. For a moment it stood frozen, its massive form wavering as blood spurted from the wound. Then, with a final strangled grunt, the bear collapsed onto its side, the life draining from its powerful body within seconds. Vladimir stood there, his breath in ragged gasps, his rifle still raised. The smell of gunpowder lingered in the air, mixing with the musky scent of the fallen bear. The silence returned, heavy and suffocating. He lowered his rifle, taking a cautious step forward. The bear lay still, its great form now nothing more than a motionless mass. His hands trembled as he exhaled. He had encountered bears before, but none had come at him with such raw aggression. He knew he would not be standing there if he had hesitated momentarily. His weapon, a customized .375 caliber rifle, had saved his life in mere seconds. The sheer power of the shot had left no room for resistance. As the reality of what had just transpired settled in, Vladimir knew he had to document the scene. He removed the camera from his backpack and captured images of the bear and its surroundings. The photos were a sobering reminder of nature's untamed brutality and the fine line between life and death in the wilderness. Hours later, as he returned to his cabin, he couldn't shake the thought of how different this day could have ended. He had been lucky. That night, as he sat by the fire, sipping a bottle of vodka to steady his nerves, he reflected on the encounter. It was a story he would tell for years, a harrowing testament to the power of man and beast. But above all, it was a reminder that survival often came down to mere seconds in the wild. Over the next few days, Vladimir's mind was plagued with the memory of the attack. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the bear's furious charge, the gleam of its fangs, the sheer weight of its presence. The thought of what could have happened if he had missed his shot gnawed at him. He had seen veteran hunters lose their lives in less intense encounters. Despite his years of experience, he realized how little control humans truly had in the face of nature's raw force. He returned to the clearing the following morning, driven by an urge to understand the encounter better. The bear's body remained undisturbed, its massive frame a grim reminder of the dangers lurking in the wild. Kneeling beside it, he traced the fur with his gloved hand, feeling the raw power that had once surged through the beast. He murmured a quiet acknowledgement, not out of victory but of respect. This bear had lived by the laws of the wilderness, just as he had, and the same harsh rules dictated its end. Back in town, he shared his experience with fellow hunters and conservationists, sparking discussions on the unpredictable nature of the Russian wilderness. Some commended his skill, while others questioned whether such close encounters should be risked. It was a debate as old as time, man versus nature, survival versus conservation. He listened but spoke little. Words did not fully capture the weight of what had happened in those few terrifying seconds. As the years passed, Vladimir's fateful encounter became a legend among local hunters. His name was whispered in campfire stories, his survival recounted as both a warning and an awe-inspiring feat. But for Vladimir, the experience left a deeper imprint. The memory of the bear's charge, the echo of his rifle, and the haunting stillness that followed would remain with him for the rest of his days. He continued hunting, but never again took his surroundings for granted. He understood now, more than ever, that life and death were separated by mere seconds in the heart of the wilderness. In the summer of 1998, the Stevens family embarked on what they believed would be an idyllic retreat in Montana's wilderness. Their rented log cabin was deep in the Absaroka Beartooth Mountains, known for its stunning landscapes, crystal-clear lakes, and thriving wildlife. Mark and Ellen Stevens, along with their two children, 12-year-old Rachel and 8-year-old Timmy, had planned a week of hiking, fishing, and peaceful bonding away from the demands of city life. The first few days of their vacation were everything they had hoped for. They spent their mornings hiking along scenic trails, their afternoons fishing by the river, and their evenings roasting marshmallows by the fire. The dense forest surrounding their cabin was alive with chirping birds and rustling leaves, despite the occasional warning sign about wildlife encounters. The family felt safe, reassured by their distance from civilization and well-stocked supplies. On the fourth day of their trip, they set out for a long hike along a remote trail that wound through towering pines and rocky slopes. The air was crisp, filled with the earthy scent of damp moss and pine needles. Emotionally filled with energy, Timmy often ran ahead, his laughter echoing through the trees. Mark reminded him repeatedly to stay close, but excitement got the better of the young boy. As the family paused to admire a small waterfall, Timmy wandered farther than intended, chasing after a butterfly that fluttered past him. In his pursuit, he unknowingly veered off the main trail and deeper into the woods. When he realized he was alone, his family's laughter had faded into silence. Panic set in as he turned in circles, disoriented by the dense foliage that all looked the same. Back at the waterfall, Ellen glanced around, suddenly noticing Timmy's absence. A sense of dread washed over her. "Mark, where's Timmy?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. Rachel pointed down the trail where he had last been seen, but was nowhere in sight. Mark's heart pounded as he called out for his son, his voice rising urgently. When there was no response, they knew they had to act fast. Meanwhile, Timmy's small footsteps crunched against the forest floor as he moved cautiously in search of his family. Then he heard a deep, guttural sound, a low growl that sent a shiver down his spine. He turned slowly and saw a massive grizzly bear standing just a few yards away, its dark eyes locked onto him. The bear's fur was matted, its powerful limbs rippling with muscle as it sniffed the air, detecting the scent of an unfamiliar presence. Timmy froze, his breath catching in his throat. The bear let out a huff, taking a slow step forward. Then another. Then another. The child had no idea how to react. His instincts told him to run, but his feet felt glued to the ground. Before he could move, the grizzly suddenly lunged, swiping at him with a massive paw. The impact sent Timmy sprawling to the ground, pain shooting through his leg where the bear's claws had raked through his skin. His scream tore through the forest, piercing the air with sheer terror. Mark and Ellen, still searching desperately, heard the cry and broke into a frantic run in the direction of the sound. As they crashed through the underbrush, their worst fears were confirmed. The enormous grizzly was standing over their son, sniffing at his bleeding leg. Mark grabbed a large fallen branch without hesitation and shouted at the top of his lungs, waving the stick wildly. Ellen screamed, arms flailing in a desperate attempt to make themselves appear larger. The bear hesitated, seemingly torn between finishing its assault and retreating. When Mark took a bold step forward, still shouting, the grizzly let out an irritated snort, then turned and lumbered off into the woods. Ellen rushed to Timmy's side, her hands shaking as she examined his injuries. His leg was badly scratched, blood seeping through his torn pants. But to their immense relief, the wounds weren't fatal. Mark scooped his son into his arms, and the family moved as quickly as possible back toward the cabin, adrenaline driving them forward despite exhaustion and fear. By the time they reached their vehicle, Timmy was weak and pale, his body trembling from shock. They wasted no time driving to the nearest hospital, where doctors cleaned and stitched his wounds. Though he would recover physically, the emotional trauma of the attack would linger for years to come. The family cut their vacation short, realizing the fragility of their safety in the untamed wilderness. They had come to Montana seeking a peaceful escape, but had instead experienced a stark reminder of nature's unpredictability. Timmy, once fearless, became more cautious, forever carrying the scars of his encounter with the grizzly. Mark and Ellen, too, were changed, their respect for the wild deepened by the harrowing ordeal. As they drove from the cabin, Rachel stared out the window, watching the towering pines fade into the distance. Their retreat had become entirely different, an unforgettable lesson in survival, the raw power of nature, and the thin line between adventure and peril. In the summer of 1997, deep in the remote wilderness of Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula, Vadim Petrov, a seasoned park ranger, patrolled the dense forests with his longtime partner, Nikolai Ivanov. The vast, untamed expanse of Kamchatka was home to one of the world's highest populations of brown bears, powerful and unpredictable creatures that ruled the wilderness. Vadim had spent over a decade protecting the land, studying its wildlife, and guiding visitors through its breathtaking yet perilous terrain. On a crisp afternoon, Vadim and Nikolai followed a narrow trail winding through the forest, watching for signs of disturbance. Recent reports of an aggressive bear near a popular hiking route had prompted them to investigate. As they moved deeper into the woods, they found fresh tracks, massive imprints in the damp earth, the telltale claw marks sending a chill down Vadim's spine. The bear they were tracking was enormous, far larger than most had encountered. A sudden deafening crash shattered the forest's stillness as they rounded a bend. A colossal brown bear emerged from the undergrowth, its golden brown fur bristling, its dark eyes locked onto them with unmistakable hostility. The beast had been lying in wait, possibly guarding a kill. The realization came too late. Before either man could react, the bear lunged forward with terrifying speed. Vadim instinctively raised his rifle, his pulse hammering in his ears, but the beast was already upon him. A massive paw struck him with bone-crushing force, sending him sprawling to the ground. Pain shot through his body as the bear's weight bore down on him, its rancid breath hot against his face. Nikolai fired a warning shot, the gun's report echoing through the trees, but the bear was unfazed. It was in a frenzy now, a towering force of unrelenting fury. As the bear's powerful jaws snapped inches from his face, Vadim fought desperately, driving his hands against the beast's thick fur, trying to push it away. The struggle was futile. The bear was too strong. Nikolai, heart pounding, took careful aim and fired another shot, this time hitting the bear's shoulder. The creature roared in pain but remained relentless. Nikolai knew he had only seconds to save his partner. With unwavering focus, he fired again, striking the bear in the side of the head. The massive beast staggered, its body trembling from the force of the impact. A guttural growl escaped its throat before it finally collapsed beside Vadim, motionless. Nikolai rushed to Vadim's side, his hands shaking as he assessed the damage. Vadim's face was pale, his uniform torn and bloodied from deep lacerations on his arm and torso. He gasped for breath, his body growing weaker with each passing second. Nikolai hoisted Vadim up, his body straining under the weight, but he knew the truth. His friend was slipping away. He radioed for emergency assistance, knowing they had to move quickly. The nearest ranger station was miles away, and Vadim's wounds were too severe. Despite Nikolai's desperate efforts, Vadim succumbed to his injuries before they could reach help. The loss devastated Nikolai, who had worked with Vadim for years, sharing the trials and triumphs of life in the wild. The days that followed were marked by profound silence. The ranger station felt emptier without Vadim's presence, laughter and steady confidence in the face of nature's dangers. The other rangers grieved in their ways, some in quiet reflection, others in their stories about his unwavering dedication to the land. A memorial was erected near the trail where he had fallen, a simple wooden carving of a bear with Vadim's name etched into its base. Nikolai was never the same after that day. The guilt weighed on him, despite knowing he had done everything he could. He replayed the moment repeatedly, wondering if a faster shot, a different strategy, or a louder warning could have made a difference. But the wilderness was indifferent to human regrets. The Kamchatka Peninsula had claimed another life, and all left were the echoes of Vadim's legacy. Despite his grief, Nikolai remained dedicated to the work he and Vadim had once shared. He took on the role of mentor to younger rangers, instilling the same respect for nature that Vadim had carried. He recounted his partner's final moments, not as a story of defeat, but as a lesson, one that no matter how skilled or prepared one might be, The wild was never to be underestimated. There were times when Nikolai considered leaving the ranger service altogether. Still, something always pulled him back. The land, the animals, the essence of what he and Vadim had protected for so many years. He found solace in his work, though the forests never felt the same. Each time he spotted a bear in the distance, he felt a deep, unspoken connection. A reminder that Vadim's spirit still lingered among the towering pines and rolling rivers. Even after years had passed, Nikolai often returned to the same forests where he and Vadim had once walked together. He would stand in silence among the towering pines, reflecting on the moment that had forever changed him. The scars of loss remained, but so did the memories, the camaraderie, the lessons, and the unyielding respect for the land that had claimed his friend's life. Though Vadim was gone, his legacy endured in the stories told by those who followed in his footsteps. In Kamchatka's vast and untamed wilderness, his name remained etched in the hearts of those who dared to walk the same path, a reminder that there were no victors in the wild, only those who endured long enough to tell the tale. In the autumn of 2011, deep in the rugged wilderness of Oregon's Cascade Mountains, Tom Grayson, a seasoned park ranger, led a search and rescue operation to find a missing hiker. The vast, untamed landscape was breathtaking and treacherous, known for its dense forests, hidden ravines, and unpredictable wildlife. Over the years, Tom had seen many cases of lost hikers, but this one felt different. The missing man, Daniel Harper, had been alone for 3 days, and with dropping temperatures and reports of increased bear activity, time was running out. Tom and a team of 4 experienced rangers moved methodically through the thick underbrush, scanning for any sign of Daniel. The terrain was unforgiving. Loose soil, jagged rocks, and thick roots made every step a challenge. Hours passed with no sign of the missing man. Then, just as the sun dipped below the tree line, one of the team members spotted a torn jacket snagged on a branch near a steep ravine. It was Daniel's. The team descended carefully, their flashlights slicing through the growing darkness. The ravine's floor was littered with fallen leaves and damp earth, the air thick with the scent of pine. Then a noise, a low growl, froze Tom in his tracks. A massive black bear loomed near a carcass, its dark eyes locking onto Tom with unmistakable hostility. The bear had been feeding, and their sudden arrival had disturbed it. Before Tom could react, the bear lunged, swiping at him with its powerful claws. The force sent him sprawling into the dirt, pain exploding through his ribs. The rest of the team shouted, waving their arms, trying to deter the animal, but it was too late. The bear had its sights on Tom. The beast advanced, its growl reverberating through the ravine. Tom scrambled for his radio, but the bear struck again, sinking its teeth into his arm. Agony shot through him as he struggled to fight back, kicking and twisting to free himself. One of the rangers, Eric Lawson, acted fast. He fired a warning shot into the air, startling the bear. The animal hesitated, its grip on Tom loosening just enough for him to pull free. Blood dripped from his wounds, his vision blurred with pain. The bear, still agitated, circled, unsure whether to retreat or attack again. Eric and the others stood their ground, rifles raised, shouting in unison to drive it away. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the bear turned and lumbered off into the darkness. The team wasted no time. Tom, though wounded, insisted they continue the search. With renewed urgency, they pushed forward. Moments later, they heard a faint voice calling for help. Following the sound, they found Daniel Harper huddled beneath a rocky overhang, weak but alive. His leg was injured from a fall, but he was coherent. Relief washed over the team as they assessed his condition and radioed for extraction. Despite his injuries, Tom helped carry Daniel out of the ravine. The journey back was slow and grueling, every step a battle against exhaustion and pain. By the time they reached the base camp, the first light of dawn was breaking through the trees. Medics quickly attended to Tom and Daniel, stabilizing them before being transported to the nearest hospital. The experience, however, left Tom deeply reflective. In the days that followed, as he lay in a hospital bed recovering, the weight of what had transpired began to settle. The feeling of the bear's claws raking across his ribs, the pressure of its teeth sinking into his flesh haunted him. But the feeling of helplessness, the realization that despite his training and experience, forces in the wild could overpower even the most seasoned ranger, truly struck him. Nature, for all its beauty, could be a brutal adversary. It was a humbling experience that forced Tom to question his perception of control in such an unpredictable environment. Over time, the physical scars began to heal, but the psychological toll lingered. Tom found himself more cautious and aware of the dangers in the wilderness. He had always respected the wild, but now that respect had deepened into something almost reverential. He knew the wilderness was a realm where man was but a small part of a much larger, often unforgiving ecosystem. He could no longer take for granted that his knowledge and skill would always be enough to keep him safe. In many ways, The incident with the bear had forced him to confront his vulnerability. As weeks turned into months, Tom resumed his duties as a park ranger. His colleagues noticed the change in him, a subtle shift from the confident leader he had been to a more measured, introspective individual. He still led search and rescue missions, but now he took every precaution to avoid unnecessary risks. He shared his experience with the newer rangers, warning them about the unpredictable nature of the wild. His story became a cautionary tale that underscored the importance of respect, preparation, and vigilance. In some ways, Tom had become a legend among his peers, a symbol of courage and the harsh realities of working in such a dangerous environment. Years later, the story of Tom Grayson's brush with death became legend among park rangers. It was a testament to the unpredictability of nature, the thin line between life and death, and the unyielding courage required to face both. But Tom knew that his experience was just one of many in a long history of park rangers who had walked the fine line between man and nature. The wilderness had claimed many lives before him, and would continue to do so long after he was gone. For Tom, the job was more than just a career. It was a calling that required an unwavering commitment to the land and the people who ventured into it. In the summer of 2014, Lori Ravenscroft, a seasoned fisherwoman, found herself once again alone on the remote lakes of northern Ontario, Canada. The area, sparsely populated and far from the bustling cities, was known for its stunning scenery and pristine waters. Lori had spent most of her adult life in these waters, fishing alone on weekends to escape the pressures of modern life. The solitude was her sanctuary, a place where she could clear her mind and immerse herself in the rhythms of nature. The landscape around her was breathtaking. Towering pine trees lined the shores, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. The lake, a serene expanse of glassy water, stretched out before her, unbroken except for the ripples caused by her boat's motor as she slowly maneuvered towards her favorite fishing spot. This particular lake, nestled in the wilderness near the Canadian border, was her favorite because of its quietude and the plentiful catch it offered. It was a place few others visited, and for Lori, its solitude was peaceful and exhilarating. The water was often still, with only the occasional splash of a fish breaking the calm. The sun shone brightly that afternoon, casting a warm glow across the landscape. Lori was sitting at the edge of her small boat, her fishing rod firmly in hand as she waited for the telltale tug of a fish on the line. The air smelled faintly of pine and fresh water, the only sounds the occasional call of a distant bird and the gentle lap of water against the boat. The stillness was broken only by the steady rhythm of her reeling, a task so familiar to her that it was almost second nature. As she waited for the fish to bite, Lori couldn't help but think about the years she had spent in these woods. Fishing alone had become her ritual, her way of reconnecting with herself and the world around her. She'd fished in all kinds of weather, from the crisp chill of early spring mornings to the humid, sweat-drenched heat of late summer afternoons. Each time she cast her line into the lake, she felt a sense of peace. But that afternoon, something was different. There was a tension in the air, a feeling she couldn't quite place. It was not long before the line jerked, signaling a bite. Lori's pulse quickened as she carefully began reeling in the fish. She knew this could be a big one. A massive shadow moved across the boat as the fish broke the water's surface. Lori barely had time to process what was happening before a black bear appeared at the lake's edge, drawn by the smell of her bait. The bear's nose twitched in the air, and its massive frame seemed to materialize from the thick underbrush on the shore. It wasn't just a bear, a force of nature, its dark fur glistening in the sunlight as it padded forward with determined steps. Startled, Lori immediately stood up, her heart racing. She shouted at the bear, waving her arms to scare it off. The bear seemed more curious than frightened, its dark eyes fixed on her every move as it lumbered closer. Lori's mind raced as she quickly assessed her options. The boat was small, and the bear was closing in too quickly. She had no weapons, and the only thing she could think of to defend herself was the oar resting at her feet. Lori's thoughts raced as the bear took another step toward her, its claws scraping against the dirt as it reached the water's edge. Within a few yards, the bear stopped and sniffed the air. Its massive form blocked the sunlight as it stood on its hind legs, towering over Lori. Panic surged through her. The boat, bobbing gently in the water, seemed too fragile to offer any real protection. Without thinking, Lori grabbed the oar and swung it toward the bear, hoping to strike fear into it. The bear growled, unfazed by the blow, and took another step forward. At this point, Lori knew she couldn't simply shout and hope the bear would leave. She had to act fast. Desperation took over. Lori scrambled to the back of the boat, her legs trembling as she tried to push the motor into action. The bear, relentlessly pursuing, began clawing at the side of the ship, sending splinters of wood flying into the air. The sound of the boat's motor sputtering to life barely reached Lori's ears over the pounding of her own heart. She shoved the throttle forward with all her strength, the boat lurching as the motor roared to life. The vibrations from the motor rattled her teeth, but they gave her the momentum she needed. She could hear the bear's heavy steps behind her as it plodded into the shallows, its massive paws sending ripples across the water's surface. The bear, still determined, followed as she powered the boat away from the shore. Lori's breath came in short gasps, her hands tight on the oar as she tried to keep her balance. The small and vulnerable boat felt like a flimsy lifeboat in the face of such an imposing threat. The bear continued to pursue her, the water churning around its massive paws as it waded into the shallows. She could hear its growls, closer now, and it spurred her on. She had to get away. The motor's hum grew louder, but the bear's persistence grew stronger. Each time the boat surged forward, the bear seemed to come just slightly closer. After an eternity, the boat surged forward, gaining speed. Now, far behind, the bear seemed to lose interest and retreated into the forest. Still breathing heavily, Lori glanced over her shoulder to see the massive shape disappearing into the trees. The adrenaline slowly began to ebb from her body as she realized she had narrowly escaped death. Her hands still gripped the oar tightly, but the tremors were subsiding. She couldn't stop shaking, but she was alive. Her heart still raced, but she forced herself to calm down. Still gripped tightly on the oar, her hands trembled with fear and aftershocks. Lori knew she had been lucky. The outcome could have been much different if she had been a second slower in starting the boat, or had not had the strength to fight back with the oar. The bear had been determined, and Lori could barely outmaneuver it. The proximity of death had been chilling, and for the first time in years, Lori felt the full weight of the wilderness's unpredictability. As the boat drifted away from the shore, Lori took a moment to reflect on the close call. The bear's unexpected attack had shaken her to her core. She had always known that venturing into bear country came with risks, but she had never imagined an encounter like that. She realized she had been unprepared for such a dangerous situation, despite her years of experience fishing alone in remote areas. This was not a time for pride, but a moment for caution. From that day forward, Lori vowed to be more cautious when venturing into bear territory. She began carrying bear spray and taking other precautions to avoid similar encounters. Her brush with death had taught her a valuable lesson about the unpredictable nature of wildlife and the importance of being prepared for anything. She also began fishing with a radio in case she was in another dangerous situation. Lori knew that being in the wilderness alone required skill, experience, and a deep respect for the creatures that shared it with her. Though she continued to fish alone, her adventures in the wild were never quite the same. She could no longer enjoy the solitude with the same carefree attitude she had once had. The wilderness had shown her its dark side, a side she would never forget. In the summer of 2015, a group of tourists found themselves in one of Earth's most remote and unforgiving places, Spitsbergen, an island in the Svalbard archipelago, deep within the Arctic Circle. The small group of adventurers had traveled to the island to experience the raw beauty of the polar wilderness, a landscape of jagged mountains, glaciers, and vast tundra. Spitsbergen, known for its breathtaking views and the opportunity to see polar wildlife, has become a popular destination for tourists seeking the thrill of true isolation. However, the island's remoteness and harsh environment also meant that danger was always lurking, and the area was home to an unpredictable population of polar bears. The island, part of Norway's Svalbard archipelago, is a land of extremes. The summer months are brief, with perpetual daylight during the period known as the midnight sun. However, these same long days can also make the island an ideal environment for wildlife, particularly the polar bear. The apex predator of the Arctic, polar bears are known to roam vast distances across the ice and tundra in search of food, especially after emerging from their long winter hibernation. During the summer months, their hunger becomes more pronounced, and they are known to venture into human settlements or campsites when food is scarce. On this particular trip, the group consisted of 8 tourists from various countries, guided by a seasoned expert, Eric Thorvaldsen. a local guide with years of experience leading expeditions in Svalbard. The tourists were a mix of thrill seekers and nature enthusiasts, eager to witness the wonders of the Arctic firsthand. They had set up camp near the coast of Spitsbergen, where the rugged landscape of glaciers and mountains loomed in the distance. Their tents were pitched close to the shoreline, offering spectacular views of the icebergs floating in the cold waters below. The group was excited about the adventure, sharing stories around the campfire as the midnight sun bathed the landscape in a surreal golden glow. However, as the night deepened, a sense of unease crept into the group. They had been warned about the risks of polar bear encounters, and the guide, Eric, had briefed everyone on the safety protocols. The group was prepared for a rare but real threat. The camp had been set up with the proper precautions, and firearms were available for defense, although they were only to be used as a last resort. Yet no one expected the danger to come so suddenly, so violently. It was in the dead of night, around 3 a.m., when disaster struck. The group was still awake, some talking quietly in tents, others drifting off to sleep. Suddenly, a loud guttural growl shattered the stillness. The tourists, disoriented and confused, were jolted from their slumber. The bear's heavy footsteps followed the noise as it approached the campsite. The growl became more aggressive, and the bear's breath filled the air. Within seconds, a towering polar bear had emerged, its massive white body visible against the sky. The bear was not just curious, it was hungry, likely driven by the area's long hibernation and food scarcity. The animal had found its way to the camp. It immediately set its sights on one of the tents, where a 17-year-old Greek tourist, Nikos Stavros, had been sleeping. Nico, who had been staying in the middle of the tent cluster, never had a chance to react before the bear lunged. Its powerful claws tore through the fabric, and Nico screamed in terror as the bear's jaws sank into his side. The sound of the attack was deafening in the quiet of the night. The group was in complete panic. Some tourists screamed, while others froze, too stunned to move. Eric, the guide, immediately grabbed the nearest rifle and rushed to Nico's aid. He fired a warning shot to scare the bear away, but it had no effect. The bear, relentless and driven by its primal need to feed, ignored the noise and continued to maul the young tourist. Nico's screams echoed through the campsite, sending waves of fear into the hearts of the remaining tourists. It was clear that the situation was dire. Now fully engaged with Nico, the polar bear dragged him away from the tents. Eric, shouting for the others to stay back, fired a second shot, aiming at the bear. The bullet struck the animal, but the bear barely flinched. The bear paused momentarily, stunned only after a third, more precise shot. Eric seized the opportunity to pull Nico from the bear's grip. However, it was too late. The young tourist was already fatally injured, his body torn apart by the bear's savage attack. The bear, seemingly content with its kill, retreated into the wilderness, leaving the group stunned. The remaining tourists were left in a state of shock, the horror of the attack still sinking in. Eric quickly radioed for help, his voice trembling as he informed the authorities of the tragedy. Rescue teams were dispatched immediately, but the harsh conditions and the remote location made any rescue effort slow and dangerous. In the meantime, the group did their best to tend to Nico's body, although they knew there was nothing that could be done. The trauma of the attack was too much to bear. When the rescue team arrived, it was already too late for Nico. The tourists, now shaken and traumatized by the experience, were evacuated from the island. The news of the fatal polar bear attack spread quickly, and it became a somber reminder of the dangers of wildlife in the Arctic. It was one of the few recorded incidents of a polar bear attack on tourists in Svalbard, but the consequences were devastating. The tragedy left a lasting impact on the survivors. Eric, though an experienced guide, struggled with the guilt of being unable to prevent the attack, despite following all the safety protocols. The other tourists, many of whom had been excited to experience the wild beauty of the Arctic, returned home with a deep sense of loss and trauma. Nico's family was devastated by the news, and the event became a reminder of the fine line between adventure and danger in such a harsh, unforgiving environment. In the aftermath of the attack, authorities in Svalbard implemented even stricter guidelines for tourists, emphasizing the importance of safety when traveling in polar bear country. Wildlife experts also raised awareness about the increasing encounters between humans and polar bears, particularly as climate change disrupted the animal's natural habitats. The attack on Nikos Stavros, tragic as it was, became a stark reminder of the real and deadly risks that come with venturing into the wilderness of the Arctic.